The Forgotten Seat. The Galactic Senate was a grand and ancient institution, standing as a symbol of unity among the countless civilizations of the galaxy. Delegates from every major species gathered in the Senate chamber, their voices echoing through the colossal hall as they debated matters of war, trade, and politics. But among the rows of occupied seats, one remained empty. It was not just any seat. It was the seat of Earth. For over 1,000 years, Earth's seat in the Senate had remained vacant. At first, diplomats had tried to reach out. Messages were sent, but none were answered. Eventually, the galaxy moved on, treating humanity as nothing more than a forgotten civilization. But now, with a new threat looming over them, some senators couldn't ignore the question anymore. Varn turned toward the Grand Hall's far side, where the empty Terran seat stood. It looked no different from the others, yet something about it felt wrong. It was almost as if it was waiting. Varn exhaled. "I will authorize an expedition. We will send a scout team to Earth and see if anything remains. If there is even the slightest chance that humanity is still out there, we need to know." The Senate chamber stirred uneasily. Some believed it was a waste of time. Others feared what they might find. But deep down, in the hearts of the oldest senators, a cold realization took root. Humanity's disappearance was not an accident. It was a choice. And the question was, why? Hours later, in the deepest chambers of the Senate archives, a group of researchers worked tirelessly, searching for any trace of Earth's last known transmissions. Most records were outdated, showing only minor details about humanity's past. But then, a technician's screen flickered. A new signal appeared. It was old, very old, yet it had just been activated. A simple message, repeating in an endless loop. "You should not have come looking." The researchers stared at the words in horror. Somewhere in the void, something had awakened, and the Senate had no idea what they had just unleashed. "We are running out of time," he growled. "The unknown invaders have already conquered 3 border worlds. Their fleets are unlike anything we have ever seen." The chamber erupted in protests. Delegates from weaker species demanded protection, while powerful empires debated military strategies. Panic filled the room. A heavy-set Ruvelian senator, his fur bristling, raised his voice. "We must send out a distress call. Summon all forces to the core worlds before it's too late." A Xilari diplomat, her crystalline form glowing under the chamber's light, shook her head. "We don't even know who they are. What if we provoke them further?" Varn sighed. He had spent years trying to hold the Senate together, but now, when they truly needed unity, they were falling apart. Then, a deep voice cut through the noise. "This wouldn't have happened if humanity was still with us." The room fell into stunned silence. All eyes turned toward Kyrex, a veteran senator of the Vornak Dominion. His dark scales shimmered under the chamber lights as he stood tall. "The humans were the only species that thought ahead," he continued. "They saw dangers before they arrived. They built weapons no one understood. And then they left." Murmurs spread through the chamber. A younger senator scoffed. "Left? You mean ran away? They abandoned the Senate. They were never truly one of us." Kyrex's gaze darkened. "And yet, here we are, struggling against an enemy we don't understand. Tell me, don't you ever wonder why they left?" The question hung in the air. The truth was, no one knew. For centuries, it had remained untouched. The dark metal chair stood in its place, perfectly preserved, yet forever unclaimed. No representative came. No messages were sent. Humanity, once considered an emerging power, had vanished from galactic politics. Some believed Earth had fallen into ruin. Others whispered that humans had abandoned the galaxy, retreating into the unknown. But the truth was far more terrifying than anyone had imagined. And today, the Senate would begin to understand why. The Galactic Senate was still in chaos after the decision to send a scout fleet to Earth. Many senators doubted the mission, believing it was a waste of time. Others feared what they might find. But Chancellor Varn had made his choice, and the fleet was already on its way. Aboard the lead scout ship, Captain Ralvik watched the empty space ahead. The last known location of Earth was a sector shrouded in mystery. No ships traveled there, no signals ever came out. It was as if the entire system had been erased from history. Ralvik's crew was uneasy. The silence around Earth's space was unnatural. The moment they crossed into the sector, every sensor went dark. No readings, no signs of life, just an endless void. Then the distress beacon activated. The sound echoed through the ship, a deep, rhythmic pulse, ancient yet powerful. It was a signal unlike anything they had encountered before. It repeated over and over, as if waiting for someone to respond. A technician's voice trembled. "It's coming from a Terran outpost, but that station should have been abandoned centuries ago." Ralvik's eyes narrowed. "Prepare a boarding party. We're going in." The scout ship approached the station. Its massive structure floated in the darkness, covered in a layer of dust and ice. The airlocks were sealed, yet power readings were stable. It was as if the station had been frozen in time. Inside, the hallways were eerily intact. Ancient monitors still flickered with static, and control panels pulsed with a dim red glow. The silence was overwhelming. Then, a door slid open on its own. A single console lit up, displaying an old message. "You should not have come looking." The team exchanged nervous glances. Then the lights went out. Emergency systems activated, revealing something the team had not expected. Behind thick glass, rows of preserved warships lay hidden beneath the station. They were unlike any known human design, sleek and built for destruction. A deep voice echoed through the station speakers. "Warning. Activation protocol engaged." The floor rumbled. The station was waking up. The Galactic Senate was still in chaos after the decision to send a scout fleet to Earth. Many senators believed the mission was pointless. Humanity had been gone for centuries, their seat in the Senate abandoned and untouched. If Earth had fallen, then there was nothing left to find. Others, however, were not so sure. Whispers had spread among the older senators, those who remembered the Terran rise to power, those who had seen their technology up close. Humanity had not simply disappeared, they had chosen to leave. But why? What did they know that the rest of the galaxy did not? Regardless of these fears, the decision had been made. Chancellor Varn had authorized the mission, and the fleet was already on its way. Aboard the lead scout ship, Captain Ralvik stood at the bridge, staring into the vast, empty space before them. The Earth system lay ahead, an uncharted void on the star maps. No ships traveled here. No signals had been received in over 1,000 years. It was as if the entire system had been wiped from existence. His crew was tense. Some of them had studied human history and knew of their technological advancements. Others had heard only rumors, stories passed down by old traders who swore that something had happened on Earth, something the Senate had never truly understood. As they crossed into the system, the ship's instruments went dark. Every sensor, every scanner, every long-range communicator, dead. The crew scrambled to restart their systems. No interference should have been able to completely blind their equipment, yet here they were, floating in absolute silence. Then, a sound broke through the void. A distress beacon activated. The deep, rhythmic pulse echoed through the ship, vibrating through the walls. It was old, far older than any of the crew had ever encountered. The signal repeated again and again, as if it had been playing for centuries, waiting for someone to listen. A technician's voice wavered. "The signal is coming from a Terran outpost, sir, but according to our records, that station was abandoned over 1,000 years ago." Ralvik's eyes narrowed. If the station had been dead for so long, then who had just activated the beacon? "Prepare a boarding party," he ordered. "We're going in." The scout ship approached the station, its massive form looming in the darkness. Layers of dust and ice coated the exterior, but the structure itself was intact. Airlocks were sealed, lights dimmed, but power readings were stable. It was as if it had been waiting. Ralvik and his team entered through the docking bay, their boots echoing in the silence. The air was still and stale, the temperature just above freezing. Ancient monitors flickered weakly, static dancing across cracked screens. Dim red emergency lights lined the hallways, casting long shadows. There were no signs of life. Yet, the station felt aware. A door slid open on its own. Weapons raised, the team moved cautiously inside. A single console flickered to life, and a message appeared on the cracked screen. "You should not have come looking." The word sent a chill through the room. The screen blinked once, then twice, before more text scrolled across. "They are watching." A security officer swallowed hard. "Sir, I don't like this." Ralvik stepped closer, studying the console. The system was running on emergency power, barely holding itself together, yet something had activated it. "Check the logs," he ordered. A technician accessed the database. The logs were ancient, dating back over 1,000 years. But there was something wrong. The final entry was not old. It had been updated 6 hours ago. Ralvik turned sharply. "That's impossible." Before anyone could respond, the lights went out. An alarm blared, echoing through the halls. Emergency systems engaged, casting everything in flashing red. Then, through the observation windows, the team saw something impossible. Beyond the station, hidden beneath layers of reinforced plating, rows of warships were lined up in silence. Sleek, enormous, human. These were not the old ships recorded in history. These were something else, designed for war, built for destruction. They had been hidden beneath the station for centuries, waiting. A deep voice echoed through the speakers, vibrating through the walls. "Warning. Activation protocol engage." The floor rumbled. The station was waking up. The station trembled beneath their feet as hidden machinery roared to life. The once dead outpost was no longer silent. Something ancient and powerful had awakened. Captain Ralvik and his team stood frozen, staring through the observation window. The warships, massive and sleek, remained still beneath the station, but the atmosphere had changed. Lights flickered on along their hulls, running in synchronized patterns like a system booting up after a long sleep. A technician's voice was barely a whisper. "Sir, they're coming online." Ralvik's mind raced. These were not the primitive human vessels recorded in history. They were something else, sleeker, deadlier, more advanced than anything in the Galactic Senate's fleet. He had to think fast. "Shut it down," he barked. "Whatever's activating these ships, turn it off." The team scrambled, fingers flying across control panels, but the system refused to respond. The station's AI had locked them out. Then the voice returned, deep and measured, as if addressing an intruder. "Unauthorized presence detected. You do not belong here." Weapons were drawn as the air became thick with tension. Ralvik raised his communicator. "Away team to command. We need extraction now." No response. The silence was deafening. One of the officers tried a secondary channel, but every signal was jammed. The station had cut them off. Then the doors behind them slammed shut. The security officer pounded against the reinforced metal. "We're trapped." A new message scrolled across the nearest screen. "We left the galaxy in your hands. You failed." Ralvik's stomach twisted. He had no idea what the message meant, but there was no time to think. If those warships fully activated, the entire Senate fleet could be in danger. "Find another way out," he ordered. The team rushed deeper into the station. Hallways stretched endlessly, lined with old insignias, Turan markings. Ralvik had never seen them before, but they carried a sense of finality, as if they had been left behind as a warning. Then they reached a massive control chamber. At its center stood a cylindrical pod, covered in dust but intact. It was surrounded by interface panels and cables that stretched into the walls like the station itself had been built around it. Ralvik approached cautiously. His fingers brushed against the pod's surface, wiping away layers of grime. Underneath, a symbol was engraved into the metal. A human handprint. Ralvik turned to his technician. "Can you open it?" I don't know. The system is locked to Terran biometrics. We'd need a human." Ralvik cursed under his breath. 1,000 years and still, the ghosts of humanity refused to be forgotten. A new message appeared on the control panel. "If you have come searching for Earth, you are already too late." Then the station's power surged. Engines flared. Shields powered up. The warships in the docking bay began to rise. And for the first time in a millennium, Earth's fleet was awake. The deep hum of awakening warships sent vibrations through the station, rattling the very walls around Captain Ralvik and his team. 1,000 years of silence had ended, replaced by a growing, ominous power. The Galactic Senate had thought Earth abandoned, its people forgotten. But this was no graveyard. This was a battlefield waiting to be reborn. Ralvik turned sharply to his crew. "We need to get out of here. Now." The security officer checked his scanner, shaking his head. "Sir, the docking bay is sealed. Our shuttle is locked out." Ralvik gritted his teeth. "Find another way." The technician frantically scanned the control panels, searching for any possible override. "The system is still rejecting us. It's like it knows we're not supposed to be here." Ralvik barely heard him. His eyes were locked on the cylindrical pod at the center of the control chamber. The Terran handprint glowed faintly, as if waiting for someone to activate it. A message blinked onto the screen beside it. "The final protocol has begun." Ralvik stepped closer. "What protocol?" No answer. The screen remained frozen, but the warships outside were no longer still. Their engines flared, their weapon systems humming to life. These were not just relics. They were fully operational. And they were waking up with purpose. Then, a deep mechanical voice echoed through the chamber. "Intruders detected. Non-Terran presence will be eliminated." The room locked down. Gas began hissing from hidden vents. The crew coughed, scrambling for their helmets. The technician panicked. "It's an automated purge system." Ralvik's mind raced. If the station's security considered them intruders, that meant only one thing. It was still answering to its original masters. The humans. And they were nowhere to be found. He turned to the pod. If it held the key to the station's systems, activating it might be their only chance, but the biometric lock, no non-human could override it. Then something happened that made Ralvik's blood run cold. The pod opened. A hiss of air escaped as the dust-covered shell split apart. Inside, suspended in a field of shimmering energy, was a figure. A human. Ralvik staggered back in shock. The figure inside was male, his skin unaged, preserved in perfect stasis. His suit bore the old insignia of Terra, a mark unseen in 1,000 years. The man's eyes fluttered open. For the first time in centuries, a human had returned. And he did not look pleased. The air in the chamber grew heavy as the human's eyes focused, scanning the faces around him. He moved slowly, his body adjusting after what must have been centuries in stasis. Captain Ralvik and his team stood frozen, gripping their weapons. But deep down, Ralvik knew they wouldn't dare fire. This was no ordinary man. This was a Terran, a species that had vanished from history, leaving only their empty seat in the Galactic Senate, a race spoken of in whispers, surrounded by fear, mystery, and unconfirmed rumors. And yet, one stood before them, awake. The human took a slow breath, stepping out of the pod. His suit's insignia, an ancient Terran emblem, glowed faintly as the station's lights pulsed in response. The system recognized him. Ralvik raised a shaky hand. Who are you?" The human didn't answer immediately. His gaze drifted to the screens, the messages blinking across them. The warships outside were nearly fully powered, and a countdown timer had begun. A silent warning that something irreversible was about to happen. Finally, he spoke. "You shouldn't be here." His voice was steady, controlled. But there was something else beneath it, something dangerous. Ralvik swallowed hard. This station is under the jurisdiction of the Galactic Senate. We, the Senate. The human's head snapped toward him, his expression darkening. The same Senate that betrayed us. The air turned electric. Every member of Ralvik's team could feel the shift, the sense that they had just stepped into something far beyond their understanding. The human took a step closer. Tell me, who rules the stars now? Ralvik hesitated. The Senate had always warned about the Terrans, called them reckless, destructive, too unpredictable to be trusted with power. But the way this man spoke, it wasn't anger, it wasn't fear. It was certainty. Ralvik chose his words carefully. The Galactic Senate maintains order across the known systems. The human exhaled sharply, almost a laugh, but there was no humor in it. He turned back to the control panel, fingers moving across it with practiced ease. A new set of data flashed across the screen. Tactical reports, star maps, Senate fleet locations. Then his expression hardened. You're lying. Ralvik stiffened. The human pointed to the data. I see the wars, the corruption, the way the strong rule over the weak. His voice was quiet but unshakable. This is not order. This is decay. The countdown on the screen reached its final seconds. The human turned, his eyes locked onto Ralvik's. You've had your time. Now it's ours again. Outside, the Terran warships moved, and the galaxy would never be the same. Ralvik's communicator crackled again. Captain, what is happening down there? We're detecting active Terran warships. Respond immediately. He gripped the device tightly, but didn't answer. His throat felt dry. What could he even say? That the Senate's worst fears were real. That humanity hadn't been wiped out or lost to time. No, they had been waiting, preparing, and now they were back. The human stepped toward him, calm but unwavering. The station around them pulsed with energy, recognizing its master. Systems once thought dead now hummed with life. Outside, the Terran warships turned their massive hulls, aligning in perfect formation. Ralvik took a shaky breath. If the Senate finds out about this, they already know, the human interrupted. His gaze flicked toward the massive view screen, where Senate fleet markers blinked rapidly, converging toward their location. Ralvik's blood ran cold. The Senate hadn't just been watching. They had been waiting. And now, they were coming. Listen to me, Ralvik said quickly. The Senate will not allow this. They will send their entire fleet to stop you. The human smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Let them come. A shiver ran through Ralvik. The confidence in those words wasn't arrogance, it was certainty. The warships outside adjusted their positions. Energy surged through their ancient weapons, lighting up their hulls in a terrifying display of power. The sheer scale of the fleet was staggering. These were not just ships. They were monuments to a power that had once ruled the stars. And now, after 1,000 years, that power was awake again. Ralvik stared at the screen, watching as Senate ships dropped out of hyperspace. Hundreds of them, a force meant to crush anything that threatened their rule. The human turned toward the control panel, pressing a single command. Across the fleet, weapons locked onto their new targets. The countdown had reached its final moments. Humanity had returned, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The day humanity walked away, the Galactic Senate chamber was filled with noise. Hundreds of alien species argued, shouted, and debated, their voices overlapping in a chaotic mess. It was nothing new. Politics in the galaxy had always been loud and messy. But today, something felt different. In the center of the Grand Hall, standing tall and silent, was Ambassador Elias Carter, the representative of Earth. Unlike the others, he did not speak. He did not argue. He simply waited. The Supreme Chancellor, a towering reptilian from the Threxian Empire, banged his staff against the floor. The chamber fell into a hushed murmur as his deep voice echoed across the hall. "Ambassador Carter of Earth, you may speak." Elias Carter stepped forward, his face unreadable. His black diplomatic uniform was pristine, the golden emblem of Earth glinting under the artificial lights. Slowly, he reached into his coat, pulling out a data pad. With a firm motion, he placed it on the table before him. The Chancellor frowned. "What is this?" Carter's voice was calm, but the weight behind his words sent a chill through the room. "Earth withdraws from the Galactic Senate, effective immediately." A silence so deep followed that for a moment, it seemed as if the entire chamber had stopped breathing. Then a shouting began. "This is absurd." The insectoid diplomat from the Zillar Republic clicked its mandibles. "You can't just leave. Humanity has a duty to the galaxy," roared a warlord from the Varkathi clans. "Your people helped build this Senate." The Supreme Chancellor narrowed his eyes. "Ambassador Carter, this is not how things work. No species has ever just left. The Senate is the foundation of intergalactic civilization." Carter did not flinch. "The Senate is broken." A ripple of shock went through the assembly. No one had ever dared to say such a thing out loud. "For centuries, humanity has mediated your disputes, fought your wars, and saved your worlds," Carter continued. "And what did we get in return? Lies, corruption, betrayal." The Supreme Chancellor's jaw tightened. "Explain yourself." Carter exhaled, as if he had been holding back these words for years. "We warned you about the Varkathi warlords gathering strength. You ignored us. We told you the Zillar were breaking trade agreements. You called us paranoid. We pointed out the Threxian military buildup on the outer rim, and you laughed at us." A murmur spread across the hall. He wasn't wrong. "We fought your wars." Carter's voice hardened. "We bled for you. We died for you. And yet, when we needed help, when our colonies were under attack, when our people were slaughtered, you did nothing." The air in the chamber grew heavy. They all knew the truth. 2 years ago, a human colony had been wiped out by an unknown enemy. When Earth called for help, the Senate had debated for months, and in the end, done nothing. Now, they were facing the consequences. "Humanity is done," Carter said. "We are closing our borders. We are leaving your wars, your politics, your corruption. From this moment forward, Earth stands alone." The Supreme Chancellor's fist slammed against the table. "You can't do this." Carter's expression did not change. "We just did." He turned without another word. As he walked away, his boots echoed in the silent hall. The other human diplomats followed. The doors to the chamber slid shut behind them. For the first time in centuries, humanity was no longer part of the Galactic Senate, and the galaxy had no idea what that truly meant. The aftermath. The news spread across the stars like wildfire. Within hours, human embassies shut down across the galaxy. Trade agreements were terminated. Earth's fleets withdrew from Senate-controlled space. The hyperlane gates leading to human territory went dark. Humanity was gone. Some species laughed. "Good riddance," they said. The Senate was better off without the arrogant, warlike Terrans. Others worried. Humanity had been a stabilizing force, the backbone of many alliances. Their fleets had kept the peace. Their diplomats had stopped wars before they began. Without them, things would change. In the halls of the Senate, the politicians continued their debates, pretending they could move forward as if nothing had happened. But deep in their hearts, a question lingered. What would happen to the galaxy, now that humanity was no longer watching? The impact of humanity's departure was felt almost immediately. Within days, the balance of power in the Galactic Senate began to shift. For centuries, the presence of Earth had ensured a fragile peace between the great powers, their influence keeping warlords and corrupt politicians in check. Now, that restraint was gone. In the Outer Rim, the Varkathi warlords wasted no time. Without human fleets patrolling the trade routes, they launched a brutal campaign against weaker systems. The Zillar Republic, which had long been held accountable by Earth's trade agreements, started imposing unfair taxes on their smaller allies. Meanwhile, the Threxian Empire began expanding its borders, claiming territories that had once been neutral. The Senate, for all its power and influence, was unable to stop any of it. They held emergency meetings, but no one could agree on a course of action. Some still refused to believe that humanity had truly left, convinced that Earth would return once the chaos reached their doorstep. Others understood the truth. Humanity was done with them. Ambassador Elias Carter returned to Earth on a silent, uneventful journey. No messages came from the Senate, no apologies, no attempts to change their minds. It was as if the rest of the galaxy had chosen to pretend that nothing had happened. That was fine. Earth had no intention of reaching out again. On the surface of Earth, things were different. A quiet but undeniable transformation had begun. The people were no longer concerned with galactic politics. The resources that once fueled the Senate's endless bureaucracy were now redirected inward. Military fleets were recalled, their weapons upgraded. Scientific research, once shared freely with the Senate's member species, became classified. Earth was sealing itself off. In hidden shipyards orbiting Mars, something massive was being built. Unlike the sleek diplomatic cruisers that once traveled between the stars, these ships were different. Heavily armored, bristling with weapons, and outfitted with technology that no other species had ever seen. For centuries, humanity had held back, choosing peace over dominance. But peace had never been reciprocated. When humanity suffered, the Senate had turned its back. Now Earth had decided to focus on itself. And if the rest of the galaxy wanted to tear itself apart, so be it. Back in the Senate, cracks were beginning to show. Old alliances started to break. Civilizations that had once worked together were now turning against each other. As warships moved and political tensions rose, whispers began to spread. Some leaders were beginning to realize the gravity of what had happened. They had underestimated humanity's importance. They had dismissed the warnings. Now they were beginning to wonder, had they made a mistake? The chaos in the galaxy continued to spread, growing worse with each passing week. Without humanity's stabilizing presence, the Galactic Senate was struggling to hold itself together. The once unified council had become a battlefield of political infighting, betrayals, and desperate alliances. The Varkathi warlords, emboldened by the lack of resistance, expanded their raids deeper into Senate-controlled space. Entire planets fell under their rule, their inhabitants forced into servitude or slaughtered in brutal conflicts. The Solar Republic continued tightening its grip on trade, seizing control of critical supply chains, and demanding exorbitant prices for resources that once flowed freely. The Threxian Empire was the worst of all. Their fleets, once kept in check by humanity's strategic oversight, began a full-scale military expansion. Several border systems fell almost overnight. Some of the smaller species pleaded for help, but their cries were ignored. And all the while, Earth remained silent. For the first time in centuries, no human ships were seen beyond their borders. No diplomats, no traders, no ambassadors. The hyperlanes leading to Earth's sector had gone dark, protected by an impenetrable wall of automated defense stations. Any ship that attempted to enter was warned once, and destroyed if they did not turn back. The other species tried to justify humanity's departure in different ways. Some claimed that Earth had grown arrogant, believing itself above the Senate. Others whispered that the humans had grown weak and were hiding out of fear. But the truth was far more terrifying. Deep within the Sol system, humanity had not abandoned its ambitions. It had simply redirected them. The resources once used to maintain peace in the galaxy were now fueling something far more dangerous. The Martian shipyards, the most advanced in the galaxy, were now producing warships at an alarming rate. The once dormant Titan-class dreadnoughts, which had not seen battle in centuries, were being reactivated. Entire fleets were being refitted with classified technology, their capabilities unknown to anyone outside of Earth's command structure. But it wasn't just warships. The scientific minds of Earth, no longer held back by the Senate's endless bureaucracy, were making breakthroughs at an astonishing speed. Advanced eye-controlled battle fleets, self-repairing nanite hulls, and weapons capable of tearing through planetary shields in a single strike. All of it was being developed in secret. And yet, humanity still did nothing. The rest of the galaxy continued to spiral into chaos. Civilizations that once stood side by side now fought bitter wars over resources, power, and revenge. The Galactic Senate, desperate to maintain control, issued a summons to Earth. They called for negotiations. They pleaded for humanity to return. Their requests were met with silence. For the first time, true fear began to settle in the hearts of the galactic leaders. They had always believed that humanity's presence was optional, that Earth had needed the Senate more than the Senate needed Earth. But now, as the flames of war spread, as economies collapsed and long-buried grudges reignited, they were forced to confront a terrifying possibility. What if humanity had been the only thing stopping the galaxy from tearing itself apart? And if that were true, what would happen if Earth ever decided to return? The galaxy was on fire. The Senate chambers, once a place of diplomacy and order, had become a battlefield of screaming politicians and desperate leaders. Accusations flew across the room like weapons in open war. Some blamed the Varkathi warlords for their relentless expansion. Others pointed fingers at the Zilla Republic for hoarding resources and driving smaller civilizations into ruin. The Threxian Empire's unchecked conquests had thrown entire regions into chaos. But beneath all the shouting, a deeper fear was taking hold. They all knew the real reason for this disaster: humanity's absence. For centuries, humans had played the role of peacemakers, strategists, and enforcers. They were not the strongest species, nor the most numerous, but their presence had shaped the galaxy in ways no one had fully understood, until now. Without them, the balance of power was gone. The Varkathi had doubled their territories in just a few months. The Zilla Republic controlled nearly every major trade route, crippling economies across the galaxy. The Threxians were no longer stopping at border conflicts. They were conquering entire sectors. And Earth did nothing. Their fleets remained hidden, their borders sealed shut. No messages were sent. No diplomats arrived to negotiate. The once powerful voice of humanity, which had shaped Senate decisions for centuries, was silent. The galaxy was spiraling toward a total collapse, and the Senate had no choice. They had to bring Earth back. For the first time in history, the Senate made a humbling decision. They would send an official delegation to Earth, not as rulers, but as beggars. A fleet of ships, carrying representatives from every major civilization, was dispatched toward Sol. They carried no weapons, no threats, only desperation. As they neared human space, they finally saw it. The Hyperion Line, a vast planetary-scale defense network that stretched across the edge of human territory. Enormous battle stations, equipped with weaponry beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen, formed an unbreakable barrier. Every ship was locked onto the moment they entered sensor range. AI-driven warning systems immediately transmitted a single message: "Turn back." The delegation hesitated. They sent a transmission, pleading for an audience. For days, there was no response. The galaxy was falling apart, and humanity refused to answer. But then, something happened. The defense network powered down, and a message, clear, cold, and emotionless, was transmitted across the fleet. "Proceed to Earth. But understand this: humanity has changed. You will not like what you find." The delegation exchanged nervous glances. They had no choice. With trembling hands, the fleet's commander gave the order to move forward. And as they passed through the once closed gates of human space, they finally saw it: the new face of Earth. And it was nothing like they had ever imagined. The delegation's ships moved cautiously through human space, their crews silent as they gazed upon the impossible sight before them. Earth's solar system had been transformed. The once familiar sight of a bustling trade hub had been replaced with something far more terrifying: a war machine of unimaginable scale. Massive shipyards stretched across Mars, constructing vessels larger than anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Hyperion-class dreadnoughts, their hulls bristling with weapons, loomed in the void like ancient gods preparing for war. Eye-controlled defense platforms moved in perfect synchronization, creating an impenetrable web of security. Even the asteroid belt had been repurposed. Automated mining stations and defense grids turned the scattered rocks into a living fortress. Earth itself, once the heart of diplomacy and commerce, was now surrounded by a fleet unlike any in history. Thousands of warships, each radiating power, stood in eerie silence, as if waiting for a single command. The delegation's lead ambassador, a Ziller named Ambassador Velker, swallowed hard. This was not the Earth they remembered. And yet, they had come too far to turn back. A communication request was sent. No response. Minutes passed, then hours. The tension on the delegation's ships grew unbearable. Then, without warning, a single human vessel appeared. It was smaller than the warships surrounding Earth, but its presence was imposing. It moved with absolute precision, as if the pilot had total control over the laws of physics. A voice crackled over the comms. Cold. Unfamiliar. Follow us. Do not deviate. Do not speak unless spoken to. Velker exchanged a nervous glance with the other ambassadors. The humans were not offering diplomacy. This was something else. Obediently, the delegation followed. Their ships were escorted past the colossal fleets, deeper into Sol's heart. And then they saw it. A station, larger than any planet. A structure so vast it seemed impossible, orbiting Jupiter like a second moon. It pulsed with energy, and its surface shimmered with advanced technology far beyond what any of them had ever seen. It was the Citadel, the new seat of humanity. The delegation's ships were guided toward a docking bay. The moment they landed, their ships were locked in place. They were no longer in control. With no other choice, the ambassadors stepped onto human soil for the first time in decades. And as they walked through the cold metallic corridors, surrounded by silent, armored human soldiers, one thing became clear. This was not a meeting. It was a judgment. The delegation walked through the corridors of the Citadel, their every step echoing against the cold metal walls. The silence was overwhelming. No diplomats greeted them. No banners of unity or peace decorated the halls. Only guards. Human soldiers, clad in advanced exo-armor, stood in rigid formation. Their faces were hidden behind reflective visors, their weapons locked to their sides, but ready. The air felt heavy, as if the very walls were watching. Ambassador Velker, his reptilian scales shifting uneasily, felt the weight of history pressing down on him. He had once debated against humanity in the Galactic Senate. He had argued that humans were reckless, too independent, too unpredictable. Now, standing in the heart of their power, he realized how little he had understood them. The delegation was led into a vast chamber, a throne room without a throne. At the center stood a single figure, a human. He was older, his face lined with experience. His uniform bore no insignia of rank, yet his presence commanded absolute authority. His dark eyes studied them with unreadable intent. Velker stepped forward, clearing his throat. "We have come on behalf of the Galactic Senate." The man raised a hand. Silence. A deep, calculated voice followed. "The Senate sent you because it is collapsing." Velker stiffened. The others shifted uncomfortably. The man continued. "You called us irrational, uncivilized. You took our place in the galaxy for granted. And now, without us, your so-called order crumbles into war and chaos." His words were not a question. They were fact. The delegation had no response. The man took a step forward. "Humanity did not abandon the Senate. We walked away because we saw what you refused to see." Asterisk, asterisk. He gestured toward a massive display screen on the wall. It flickered to life, showing live feeds from across the galaxy. Wars raging. Planets burning. Trade routes in ruins. Your systems failed because they were built on assumptions. Assumptions that humanity would always be there to clean up your mess. Velker's throat went dry. Then why not return? The human's expression darkened. Because we are no longer your caretakers. A tense silence filled the chamber. Humanity evolved. While the rest of the galaxy fought over power, we prepared. We built something greater than the Senate ever could. And now you stand in our halls, begging for our return. Velker felt a shiver run down his spine. The human stepped even closer. We are not returning. The question you should be asking is this. He leaned in. Can you survive without us? The delegation stood frozen, the weight of the human's words sinking deep into their minds. The truth had been laid bare before them, undeniable, inescapable. The Galactic Senate had not pushed humanity away. They had relied on them for stability, for innovation, for protection, without ever admitting it. And now, without humanity, the galaxy was spiraling into chaos. Ambassador Velker struggled to find the right words. He knew what was at stake. The Senate had sent them not just as representatives, but as desperate envoys seeking salvation. They had convinced themselves that humanity would return if only they could be reasoned with, if only they could be reminded of their responsibility to the greater galactic order. But the cold, unflinching gaze of the human before him told a different story. You cannot mean this, Velker finally said, his voice quieter than he intended. We need you. The galaxy needs you. If you do not return, the conflicts will only worsen. Countless worlds will fall. Billions will die. The human studied him for a long moment before turning away, walking toward the massive display that still showed the crumbling state of the galaxy. Velker felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps he was considering their plea. Perhaps there was still a chance. Then the human spoke again, his voice calm but unwavering. For centuries, humanity stood with the Senate. We fought your wars, we built your trade networks, we solved the problems you refused to acknowledge. And what did we get in return? Velker opened his mouth, but no words came out. The human turned back to them, his expression unreadable. We were treated as an inconvenience, as unpredictable anomalies, as a danger to your so-called order. The Senate believed it could dictate our place in the galaxy, limit our influence, keep us contained. So we let them. And we watched, and we waited. He stepped closer, his eyes locked onto Velker's. And then we left. Not in anger, not in war, but in silence. And in that silence, the galaxy has shown its true nature. He gestured to the screens. Without humanity, your leaders turned against each other. Alliances shattered. Wars erupted over resources, over power, over fear. The stability you took for granted no longer exists, because you never built it yourselves. We did. A silence hung in the air, thick with tension.